was talking with Dr. Turner Osler, who is our seating guru, about lymphatic system recently. And in yoga, people think that if you do inversions, it helps the lymphatic fluids move because they don't have a pump like the heart. So this led to some very interesting back and forth between myself and Dr. Osler, and I thought that you should hear it too. So welcome back to the show, Dr. Osler.
Nice to be here, Deborah. Thank you for asking me.
So can you explain for us what the lymphatic system is and what role it plays in the human body?
Right. So we've known about arteries for a long time, for thousands of years, because if you cut an artery, blood spurts out and within minutes, the patient is dead. We didn't discover veins until quite a long time later. I mean, you could kind of see them under the skin, but it wasn't understood that the veins gathered the blood and brought it back to the heart so that it was a circulatory system. This was worked out by Harvey in about 1600, English physician. And interestingly, they didn't have the idea of capillaries, and they knew that the heart pumped blood out arteries, and somehow it came back in veins, and through the vena cava to the right side of the heart. And Harvey had the brilliant insight that if the same amount of blood that's going out is coming back, then it must be a connected system. So even though the microscope wouldn't be invented for another couple of hundred years, Harvey figured out that there had to be tiny connections between the arteries and veins, the capillaries, that make blood circulate. And then more lately, they discovered that the capillaries have to have extremely thin walls so that oxygen can diffuse across and carbon dioxide and urea and all the garbage of the human body gets recollected, brought back to the heart, sent to the kidneys, and gotten rid of. So the circulatory system not only delivers the good stuff, but it picks up the garbage. All this is terrific. The problem is that the capillaries have such thin walls that they leak. And the fluid that leaks out of the circulatory system is lymph. It's basically plasma. If you take a liter of blood and spin it down in a centrifuge, you get about 40% red cells as a gooey mass, and then you get this straw-colored fluid on top, which is plasma. And that straw-colored fluid, can leak through the capillary walls, and so it gets out and just is juice in the body. It bathes all the cells, so it's good. It can, pick up garbage, but then it has to get back into the circulation somehow. And it turns out that the human body has a whole nother circulatory system, the lymph system, which is made out of impossibly tiny, thin-walled vessels that you never see in the operating room because they are so diaphanous, so thin-walled and transparent. But they collect all of the lymph from the body and bring it back, and then there's one on the left, big one on the left, smaller one on the right, that connect right at the subclavian vein under the clavicle and inject the lymph back into the circulation of the body so the whole system works. It's a very, very clever system. But you have to ask the question, well, how is lymph propelled through the lymphatic system? The heart has the heart pumping stuff to move it along. How does lymph move? It turns out that the lymphatic channels are inside of muscles. When a muscle squeezes, it squeezes everything inside it, including the lymph channel, the lymph vessels. And because they have valves, you squeeze it, the lymph goes north up to the subclavian artery, subclavian connection, then into the heart, every time a muscle contracts. And so the lymphatic system just automatically pumps lymph out of the tissue space by any time the muscles are active. And so if you're walking or moving around in any way, the muscles are squeezing, the lymph is getting pumped. And so it works fine. If you're a hunter-gatherer and you spend a lot of time moving around. If you're a 20th or a 21st century Westerner, you spend an immense amount of time sitting. And then your muscles aren't active and the lymph just pools. I don't know if you have had this experience, but if you've ever taken even a moderately long airplane flight, when you get off of the airplane, if you take one finger and push on your tibia, the big bone in your lower leg, it makes a dent in the flesh and the dent stays there. This is called pitting edema. The swelling of the lymph that couldn't get back to your heart because you weren't moving has just stretched and engorged the tissues. And you can push with your finger and make a dent. And so this is called pitting edema. And you see it in people with heart failure, you know, when nothing is working and fluid just backs up. But if you have had a long plane flight and you leave a dent in your flesh and it stays there, it's pretty unnerving. And so you know that sitting for long periods of time in an airplane has got to be a bad idea because you wind up looking like that. So this problem doesn't occur in people who are moving and naturally and so on. It only occurs in people who are, you know, artificially constrained, writing computer code or doing email or whatever in their office chair for hours at a time with their legs hanging down. When you're lying flat, it's much easier for the lymph to get back because it doesn't have to fight a pressure head. But when you're upright, there's all this, you know, there's this column of fluid trying to get back to the heart. And so the lymph gets into the tissues and really can't get back to the heart in people who are sedentary. And this is why, you know, the idea of inversions is so interesting to me, because in people who are sitting a lot, inversions make sense because it helps drain that lymph out and get it back where it belongs, to your heart, by being upside down. You don't find the Hadza or the Bamabudi or any of these hunter-gatherers doing inversions because they don't need to. They're moving around constantly and their lymph system is working as designed, you know, pumping lymph back to the heart. But in the Western crowd that's like sitting around in their office chairs for 8 or 10 hours a day, you know, inversions might make a great deal of sense. It might be the quickest way to get your edema under control. And I'll say you don't necessarily have to go, you know, full-on handstand press. It might just be, and we know that if you get your feet higher than your head, it feels good because you're getting the tension out of the flesh that is caused by this edema that's piled up. And that's why putting your feet up after you've been on your feet all day long feels so good, because you're giving your lymph system a boost. Interestingly, if you've been walking all day long, you don't really have that urge. But if you've been standing all day long, you really have the urge to put your feet up and drain the lymph back into your central circulation. I'll just add that this problem of lymph that we humans have isn't universal. Other species have special hearts that pump lymph. Lymph is such important stuff that other especially amphibians and reptiles have extra hearts that are tiny and pump lymph, because the circulation of the lymph is crucial to the survival of the organism. And we get by just kind of parasitizing the energy and work that's done by muscles when we walk and get around to force lymph back to the heart. Other species have very much more complicated systems.
So let me ask you this. If you don't move, if you're sitting all day, whether you're on a long flight or you're sitting in an office chair, what is the potential downside? I mean, you mentioned heart failure. Is that what people are risking, or is it something like the metabolites of, you know, our body are not being recirculated and cleansed out of the body? I mean, what
no,
is
it's a good question. You know, we know that the long-term consequences of sitting a lot are bad. We've known that since the 50s, when the British did a very famous study that was published in the Lancet in about 1953, where they looked at bus drivers, and they were double-decker buses, so there was buses. So there was one guy who ran around taking tickets with a special little machine, and there was another person who just sat there and drove the bus. And because they had lifetime employment and they had healthcare records, they were able to see that the people who sat all day were much more likely to die of a heart attack. So, you know, since the 1950s, you know, so it's for almost 100 years, we've known that people who sit around don't do well. And exactly why that is harder to say. But part of it is that your muscles aren't just mechanical activators that move your bones. They're also immensely complicated biochemical factories that spin off hormones and enzymes and really manage the milieu intérieur, the goings on inside of your skin envelope. So when people sit a lot, their bad cholesterol goes up, their good cholesterol goes down, their insulin goes up, their all-cause mortality goes up. I mean, sitting is a very unnatural thing because your muscles contribute to your health, but only when they're working. When they're lying electrochemically dark, you know, just slumped doing nothing, the health consequences are really cataclysmic. The epidemiologists have worked it out, and people who sit 8 or more hours a day lose, on average, 2 life years. So that's a lot. Any epidemiologist would kill to extend people's lives on average 2 years. I should rephrase that. Any epidemiologist would take it an important discovery if you found a way to extend people's lives by 2 years.
No, I like that. And I'd like our viewers to know that Dr. Osler has done some excellent videos on our channel, and you can see for yourself some of the other deleterious effects of sitting. This has been so fascinating. I mean, I never understood the mysteries of lymph and how it could be separate from the heart and yet so connected before. And I always thought when you were on a long plane ride that part of it was the gravity, and that's part of why your ankles would swell and you would feel so
But
heavy.
that gravity is present all the time. It's just when you're sitting still that you can't fight gravity with your muscles squeezing lymph back to the heart. So it's the sedentariness, not the gravityness.
So the other thing that you can do is move while you're sitting. And this, I did 2 different episodes on active sitting, but I think Dr. Osler would agree that if you just fidget and move as much as you can, stomp your feet, march in place, you will be doing yourself something good.
And it's not just Dr. Osler. Epidemiologists have looked into, people sitting and having all these difficulties and dying early. But one very smart survey that was done in Great Britain about 8 years ago had the wit to ask, are you a fidgeter? And it turns out that people who are avowed fidgeters, just sewing machine knee or tapping your toe or just whatever, that's enough to make an immense difference in how well people do long term, because it just keeps the muscular system from going completely dark. You just have to be idling, but you can't turn it off.
So on that note, I would like everybody to instantly embrace the idea of fidgeting. And we can't wait to have you back on the show, Dr. Osler. We've got some other really interesting topics to discuss. So stay tuned, everybody, and we will see you next time.